tea.
What's going on? The Pharisee heresy. All right. What are we doing tonight? John, chapter, you say 7 and 8?
I'm going to stop sharing. Yeah, there we go. Yeah. Just wanted to look at some cultural context for Sukkot.
Yeah, go for it.
I'll share my Bible app here. And then we'll jump back to your lovely face.
So we're talking about the Feast of Tabernacles, aka Sukkot.
Yeah, we'll jump right ahead. Well, I guess this part is important here in the beginning of chapter 7, so we'll read that too. So after this, Jesus went about in Galilee. He did not wish to go about in Judea because the Jews were looking for an opportunity to kill him. Now the Jewish festival of booths was near, so his brothers said to him, "Leave here and go to Judea, so that your disciples also may see the works you are doing. For no one who wants to be widely known acts in secret. If you do these things, show yourself to the world." For not even his brothers believed in him. Jesus said to them, "My time has not yet come, but your time is always here. The world cannot hate you, but it hates me because I testify against it that its works are evil. Go to the festivals yourselves. I am not going to this festival, for my time has not yet come fully." After saying this, he remained in Galilee. So how dare he, Daniel? Jesus not going to the Feast of Tabernacles. What's up?
How dare he? Well, it's interesting that it says, it was his brothers who questioned him there. Matthew 13:55 identifies his brothers as James, Joseph, Simon, and Judas, who apparently were not believers at this point, the way that they seemed to be questioning him, because they said, leave here and go to Judea.
Isn't family the toughest, though?
Yeah, family's the toughest. They don't want to believe you until you've already done it all.
Got to write a whole book on historicism.
Yeah, and then they don't read it. But I guess he was in Galilee in his home stomping grounds, and so his brothers were like, "Go to Judea and prove yourself, so your disciples can see the works you're doing." Because if you're legit, nobody who's legit does this stuff in secret. Go ahead and show yourself to the world and prove it. Because his own brothers didn't even believe in him.
Right. He's like, "They're going to kill me." He's like, "Go anyways."
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to, I don't know, probably shouldn't even go on this rabbit trail, but I know people will say, he was keeping a different calendar. That's why he didn't want to go. He was going to show up later for his own calendar.
Right. Yeah. And, well, it's interesting that there are 3 pilgrimage festivals in Scripture. In other words, where the males must appear in Jerusalem. So you have Passover, you have Pentecost, and you have Tabernacles. And so this is the fall feast that all males are to appear. So it makes sense that he's talking to his brothers because they're all required to go to Jerusalem for the feast. So they're basically telling him, "Hey, this is our pilgrimage festival. You need to go up and prove yourself this year at the Feast of Tabernacles in front of everybody. Because everyone that's important, everybody that knows anything is going to be there." And so it was already assumed that they were all going to be going up to the feast. And so he said, "Go up to the feast on your own. I'm not going up to this feast because my time has not yet come." So this wasn't, a lot of times people are assuming he's talking to his disciples, like he's telling them, "Go up without me," but he's not. He's talking to his brothers.
Mm-hmm.
And so he's not teaching his disciples and misleading his disciples. he's separating from his brothers who didn't believe him. He had a separate mission and purpose from what they were doing. And I do have a note here that several manuscripts, they read, I am not yet going up to this feast. Some read, I'm not going up to this feast, and some say, I'm not yet going up to this feast, which makes sense that he would say, I'm not yet, because he does go up to the feast. He just goes a little bit later.
Spoiler alert. Shall we read on?
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, let me share again. All right. But after his brothers had gone to the festival, then he also went, not publicly, but as it were, in secret. The Jews were looking for him at the festival and saying, Where is he? And there was considerable complaining about him among the crowds, while some were saying, He is a good man. Others were saying, No, he is deceiving the crowd. Yet no one would speak openly about him for fear of the Jews. But about the middle of the festival, Jesus went up into the temple and began to teach. The Jews were astonished at it, saying, How does this man have such learning when he has never been taught? Then Jesus answered them, My teaching is not mine, but his who sent me. Anyone who resolves to do the will of God will know whether the teaching is from God or whether I am speaking on my own. Those who speak on their own seek their own glory, but the one who seeks the glory of him who sent him is true, and there is nothing false in him. Any thoughts there? You want to keep reading?
Well, my only thoughts are they're questioning how does he know so much without having studied. And so for them, to speak and teach with authority meant you had shmicha, or basically an rabbinic ordainment or authority, the laying on of hands. And so what would happen is he would have to study under a rabbi for some time and go through training under a rabbi and be sent by that rabbi to teach the message that that rabbi ordained you to teach. So then he answers them and says, my teaching is not my own. In other words, I'm not coming on solely my own authority or by myself. My shmika comes from God. So my teaching is from God. So if you desire to do God's will, then you will know that my teaching or my shmika is from God, or whether I speak on my own. So if you have the right heart, you'll know. And then it seems like he goes off on a tangent. Hasn't Moses given you the law, yet none of you keeps it? Why are you trying to kill me? It seems unconnected, but he can see right through them and knows exactly what they're up to.
Yeah, from my studying of the Sanhedrin, you can only have the Shemitah, or if you were like from the Sanhedrin had to give it to you, essentially. So if there was no members of the Sanhedrin, then like no one can have Shemitah. I guess that's the other thing, is they expected Messiah to come before the Sanhedrin, and so they could test him, which he never really does.
Right.
So he's not playing by their game.
Right. In a way, he does come before the Sanhedrin, and they do test him, but in not the way that they're expecting, kind of, Yeah,
and it wasn't traditional Sanhedrin. It was Caiaphas's house at night.
Yeah.
But that's a whole other topic. Let's continue
Any other
on.
Thoughts?
No.
All right.
All right. Continuing on. All right. Did not Moses give you the law, yet none of you keeps the law? Why are you looking for an opportunity to kill me? The crowd answered, You have a demon. Who is trying to kill you? Jesus answered them, I performed one work, and all of you are astonished. Moses gave you circumcision. It is, of course, not from Moses, but from the patriarchs. And you circumcise a man on the Sabbath. If a man receives circumcision on the Sabbath in order that the law of Moses may not be broken, are you angry with me because I healed a man's whole body on the Sabbath? Do not judge by appearances, but judge with the right judgment. Any thoughts there?
I'm just thinking about how many people accuse Messiah of breaking the Sabbath, just like the Pharisees did. And his defense is not that he's allowed to break the Sabbath. His defense is he's not breaking the Sabbath. He's judging it justly. He's looking at it rightly, unlike them who were not looking at it rightly.
I think this note is a point that you're trying to make here too. So this 723 about uncircumcision, arguing that the rabbis argued it was okay on the 8th day. Circumcision, took priority as a work on the Sabbath. And even the Pharisaical school of Hillel permitted prayer for the sick on the Sabbath, which and we'll probably get to this tonight, but how the Shamites, house of Shammai, rejected the practice of prayer for the sick. So Jesus healing on the Sabbath, right? It's like they're considering that a work, but even Levites would work on the Sabbath and all that.
Right. So you make a good point that he's not even departing from Pharisaic doctrine so much as putting forth one version or another version of a Pharisaic doctrine, as in, here's how you're supposed to understand the Sabbath. The Hillelites say it's okay to pray to heal a man on the Sabbath. In like fashion, you guys say it's okay to circumcise on the Sabbath. Each one of you is judging what is appropriate on the Sabbath based upon judging rightly on what's more important. Is it more important to do zero work or to fulfill the command to circumcise? Is it more important to do zero work or to fulfill the command, to bless, to heal? And so here he's saying, well, I'm only fulfilling the greater commandment here. I'm not breaking anything. You want me to read the next little section?
Sure, go ahead.
All right. So, verse 25. Then some of the people of Jerusalem began to say, isn't this the man they are trying to kill? Yet here he is, speaking publicly, and they are not saying anything to him. Have the rulers truly recognized that this is the Christ? But we know where this man is from. When the Christ comes, no one will know where he is from. Then Yeshua, still teaching in the temple courts, cried out, you know me, and you know where I am from. I have not come of my own accord, but he who sent me is true. You do not know him, but I know him, because I am from him, and he sent me. So they tried to seize him, but no one laid a hand on him, because his hour had not yet come. Many in the crowd, however, believed in him and said, when the Christ comes, he will perform more signs than this man? Thoughts?
Yeah, let's see if we have any good notes here. Yeah, I don't know much about this hidden Messiah tradition. I was looking through the notes and I saw that a few times. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that. Where like they say no one will know where he comes from, but they know that he comes from the Galilee.
Yeah, I thought about that too. I was like, wonder what that is. I'm sure there's something, a tradition, or maybe Talmudic, I'm not sure, but that there must be a tradition about the Messiah that no one would know where he came from. The ironic thing is we'll see later in this passage, is that they didn't actually know where he came from. They thought he was from Nazareth, but he was actually from Bethlehem. Even, he grew up in Nazareth, but they didn't actually, it seems like they didn't realize that he was actually born in Bethlehem. True. So they were actually confused about where he came from and kind of self-fulfilled this prophecy, so to say. And I do find it interesting that the people of Jerusalem said, isn't this the man they are trying to kill? So the people knew what these Pharisees were up to, even though they the ones who mocked him and said, oh, is there a demon? You think we're trying to kill you? And people are like, isn't this the man they're trying to kill?
We're not trying to kill you. Put the knives away. Yeah, I'm sure Jesus could have defended, his origin too, and said, yeah, I came from Bethlehem, or I was in Egypt for 12 years, or. I guess he wasn't in Egypt for 12 years. He was down there a while, though. Till Herod died, I think.
3 years or something?
Yeah, so it wasn't been that long.
I don't know. I don't remember exactly how long, but...
Well, that's the debate. When did Herod die? Read Daniel's book for the answer.
It's also interesting that there were many in the crowd who believed in him. So oftentimes this picture gets painted like everyone rejected Messiah. Everyone hated Yeshua. All the Jews hated him. He didn't have crowds that followed him. The truth is that it was a very divided thing. Lots of people believed in him and wanted to follow him and wanted to believe in him.
Yeah, a lot of those people were probably from the Galilee, or maybe I'm sure a lot of people came up from Egypt too to celebrate the feasts. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of Jews in Egypt at this time, so they probably believed and went back home. And it's probably the Pharisees that were on site,
right?
And they just kind of throw this. John throws the Pharisee word around, but it's like not all Pharisees were evil.
Right.
I think that comes up to a point here. Yeah. So read this next part. The Pharisees heard the crowd muttering such things about him, and the chief priests and the Pharisees sent temple police to arrest him. Then Jesus said, I will be with you a little while longer, and then I am going to him who sent me. You will search for me, but you will not find me, and where I am you cannot come. The Jews said to one another, Where does this man intend to go, that we will not find him? Does he intend to go to the dispersion among the Greeks and teach the Greeks? What does he mean by saying, You will search for me and will not find me, and where I am you cannot come? So even there, the dispersion, that could include Egypt, because remember, Egypt was Greek for 200 to 300 years at that point.
Yeah. I think interesting where they contrast themselves with the Greeks. And so this term Jews, you say Jew and you kind of think, oh, well, that's everybody in this area, but really we already have a contrast between the Galileans and the Jews. So I think when we hear Jew, we should kind of think more Judean, right?
Right.
Like Judea and Samaria, and like Judea and the Galilee is like a little bit of a different region. So Yeshua knew that when he was going into Judea proper, that things got a little bit more heavy, and that the people there were a little bit more engrossed with the politics, and it was more dangerous. So the Judeans said to one another, where does he intend to go? Will he go where the Judeans are dispersed among the Greeks, or like the diaspora, right? The dispersion of Judeans or Israelites, perhaps. And today we live in a greater diaspora where Jews are scattered all over the earth. So.
Yeah, it's almost like they treated them like second-class children of God.
Mm-hmm.
Even though they probably kept Torah and had understandings of Messiah, maybe even showed up for some of these pilgrim feasts, if they could, and not a lot of them could, they couldn't all make it,
right.
Like we can't, but there's no temple, so you can't really keep the feasts like they could at this time. So the commandment's a little more loose. Happy Sukkot, mm-hmm. By the way, if you're Sukkot. Celebrating. Yeah, there's a good little note here on 732. The Pharisees likely constituted only a minority in the high Jewish council known as the Sanhedrin in this period. Although rarely poor, probably most Pharisees did not belong to the economic elite, but they and the dominant Sadducees cooperated on issues of public order, sent temple police to arrest him. The chief priest could use Levite temple guards to address trouble in the temple. That is a good point. If we remember our history of Hanukkah part 2 that we did, Pharisees did comprise a large part of the Sanhedrin after the death of Alexander Yunnai, and especially with Hillel the Elder. But when Herod took over and got full control, he made sure that the Sadducees and corrupt Pharisees were mainly sitting on the council. And that also has a lot of issues with the deaths of Stephen and Jesus and those trials. So just something to consider.
That's such a good point, because it so often gets put out there like, your everyday Pharisee is the one that was on the Sanhedrin, condemning Yeshua and always trying to test him and trap him, when not all of them were like that. And the people that were put in power were generally the corrupt ones, that would work hand in hand with Herod, who murdered John the Baptist, so yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And
I think that's good history to mention that Alexander Yunnai, because I think it's going to come up here with the rivers of living water. But I don't want to get ahead of myself.
All right, we'll wait on that then.
But
I'll read the next section.
Just keep that name in mind. Yeah, go ahead.
All right. Verse 37. On the last and greatest day of the feast, Yeshua stood up and called out in a loud voice, "If anyone is thirsty, let him come to me and drink. Whoever believes in me, as the scripture has said, streams of living water will flow from within him." He was speaking about the Spirit, whom those who believed in him were later to receive, for the Spirit had not yet been given, because Yeshua had not yet been glorified.
Let's stop there.
Okay.
Do you know about the water libation ceremony?
Yes, on the last day of the feast, the 8th day of the feast, what do they call that? Simchat Torah, rejoicing in the Torah.
I don't know. Well, now I do know.
I think that's a nickname for the day. But you'll have to refresh my memory on what how the libation ceremony went.
I think there's a note in here that covers some of it. But I think so let's read this quick. So a highlight of the Festival of Booths was the water drawing ceremony. That's the water libation ceremony I mentioned. It's the other name for it. Priests would draw water from the pool of Siloam and lead a procession to the temple, where they would pour out water at the altar. Before Jerusalem's destruction in AD 70, pilgrims from the diaspora would visit Jerusalem for the festival, knew about this ceremony. Indeed, some scholars point to souvenirs from as far away as Cyprus that may depict the ceremony. Priests poured water at the altar to signify the biblical promise that in the time of restoration, rivers of living water would flow from the temple. This promise was supported from scriptures read on the last day of the festival, Ezekiel 47, about rivers of water flowing from the temple, and Zechariah 14, our favorite chapter there, and waters flowing from Jerusalem. Zechariah 14 is the only passage in the prophets addressing the festival. That's right. Zechariah. We should have read Zechariah too. Talks about how in the last days, the millennial reign, it mentions Sukkot, that all the nations will come for Sukkot to
Right.
The new Zion, New Jerusalem. All right, Jesus' paraphrase of the scripture as water flowing from literally his belly may evoke the Jewish tradition of Jerusalem and the temple as the navel of the earth. Thus his wording would refer to the biblically promised waters flowing from Jerusalem. But Jesus refers to the Spirit rather than to literal water, perhaps refers to the temple of his body, since in 739 believers receive the Spirit, Jesus seems to be the Spirit's source. So that's really cool, because sometimes we just think, imagine yourself at this feast and everyone's just hanging out, having a good time. Jesus over there like, I am living water. It's like, where's the context? Like, what are you talking about? If there was this water ceremony where they're, I think they did this. I think it's on YouTube, they like redid this ceremony for like the first time like in 2,000 years, a couple of years back, and there's like a video of it. And it's like that gives you like a picture. It's like this big event of them like carrying this water and pouring it out on the altar. And so the context alone is what he's talking about, but also you remember Alexander Yunnai. There's another proof for this water libation ceremony because he pours it out not on the altar but at his feet, which was a mockery of the Pharisees. And so that was during the Feast of Sukkot. You remember what they did to the high priest and king Alexander Yunnai?
They like throw tomatoes at him or something.
They threw the citrons that you wave. The giant lemons. Yes. And that started the first Judean civil war, which has a lot of context here because it pretty much divided the Pharisees and the Sadducees. This was 100 years before, the events now, or not now, 30. Well, yeah, a little bit over 100. But a lot of those Pharisees fled to the Galilee, and that's where they fought their war from. They actually ended up defeating him, and then his wife took over, Alexandra, and she put her brother-in-law, Simon ben Shetta, as Nasi of the Sanhedrin and helped bring a Pharisee majority for quite a while, and then eventually Hillel the Elder came along as well.
So Alexandra was kind of a good guy, heroine, so to say.
Yep. She's seen favorably, yeah.
Because Alexander had crucified like 600 Pharisees.
800 Pharisees, yeah.
800 in front of their children or something.
Yep.
Yeah, it's pretty horrible. Yeah, so you have...
Actually, I believe it was worse than that, but
yeah,
he murdered their wives and children in front of them while they were on crosses.
That's right. That's what it was, yeah.
He's not a nice guy.
So the context here is you have the Pharisees...
Should have thrown bigger lemons.
Generally had fought for righteousness, purity, sanctity in the land against the corruption of Alexander Yunnai. And then after going through these brutal Judean civil wars, many Pharisees survived and maintained the cultural, integrity. But then you have Herod come into power and the rise of the Herodian dynasty. And then Herod is putting corrupt politicians, into power in these positions on the Sanhedrin and chief priests and such and so forth. So it seems like you have good people-loving Pharisees that just are like your local pastor of a good church, and then you have the ones that are very powerful that are abusive and corrupt. And it's very much a dichotomy within its own house there.
Yeah, and even the crucifixion of those Pharisees was they won the war, but then they kind of felt bad about it, and they let him go, thinking they'd make peace, and he just turned around, and those 800 were like leaders in the Pharisee like army, I guess.
Yeah.
All right, on that somber note.
On that note. Want me to read verse 40?
Yeah, go ahead.
All right. On hearing these words, some of the people said, "This is truly the prophet." Others declared, "This is the Christ." But still others asked, "How can the Christ come from the Galilee? Doesn't the scripture say that the Christ will come from the line of David and from Bethlehem, the village where David lived?" So there was division in the crowd because of Yeshua. Some of them wanted to seize him, but no one laid a hand on him. So there you have it. They thought, they didn't realize he was from Bethlehem. They knew that he was a Galilean because he grew up there, but they didn't realize he was from Bethlehem. So they didn't even know enough about him to qualify him in their own minds.
Now that I'm older, I kind of get that. it's like there's no point in defending yourself sometimes, you could, but I don't know, it almost weakens your position to just
Right.
let people be dumb.
It's better when they find out that they were wrong on their own
Right.
than to tell them they were wrong. Right. Okay.
Yeah, I might
End of
keep
the
reading
chapter.
and I'll just look for any notes.
Yeah. Verse 45. Then the officers returned to the chief priests and Pharisees, who asked them, "Why didn't you bring him in?" "Never has anyone spoken like this man," the officers answered. "Have you also been deceived?" replied the Pharisees. "Have any of the rulers or Pharisees believed in him? But this crowd that does not know the law, they are under a curse." Nicodemus, who had gone to Yeshua earlier, and who himself was one of them, asked, "Does our law convict a man without first hearing from him to determine what he has done?" "Aren't you also from the Galilee?" they replied. "Look into it, and you will see that no prophet comes out of Galilee." Then each went to his own home. So here you have the famous Nicodemus, who was a Pharisee that followed Yeshua, albeit secretly up until the time of his death. Nicodemus was an esteemed Pharisee who supported Yeshua. And he might have been, like one of those that warned Yeshua early on. If you look in Luke chapter 13.
Oh my God.
I'll just
read it.
Let me see if I can find it real quick. Yeah, verse 31. Luke 13:31. At that very hour, some Pharisees came to Yeshua and told him, "Leave this place and get away, because Herod wants to kill you."
Right.
And Yeshua basically said, "Don't worry, go tell that fox. I'm going to keep driving out demons and healing people." So
that's a great point.
It's kind of a glossed over passage, but here you have Pharisees trying to warn him about Herod trying to kill him. So clearly you have Herod's posse, and then you have your general just truth-seeking Pharisee that is trying to figure out this guy Yeshua and genuinely cares about him and the truth, and trying to warn him about the danger that he's in.
Yeah, it's definitely not talked about enough. The Pharisees aren't schizophrenic. There's just different groups. It's like, oh, yeah, let's kill him. No, let's save him.
And that's in the corollary passage to that is Matthew 23, because right after this he says, "Oh Jerusalem, Jerusalem, who kills the prophets." So if you look at where he says that in Matthew 23, that is right after he basically bashes the scribes and Pharisees. That's this passage where he says, "Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, you hypocrites, you shut up the kingdom of heaven. You traverse land and sea to win a convert, but you make him twice as a son of hell as you are. Blind guides, hypocrites, whitewashed tombs." And then he talks about how they murdered all the prophets. And it says, "Oh, Jerusalem." So it sounds like this is the same place. After he just goes and bashes all these Pharisees, a few of them come up to him and they're like, "Hey, man, you should probably be careful because Herod wants to get you killed." So some of them supported him, at least.
Yeah, I'm sure more than some. Just takes a few rotten eggs to ruin the whole omelet.
Right. Any other thoughts there on that last part of John 7?
No, I was just reading some notes here saying that no prophets come from the Galilee, or I guess you could think Northern Kingdom, but it says Gath Heifer. I don't even know who that is, but I think Jonah was also a Northern Kingdom prophet, but I don't know if he came from Galilee, and I know Elijah did both.
Interesting.
Anyways. Yeah,
Okay.
I was going to skip this little part here because I think it throws off the whole Sukkot theme. And here's a little note, too. Let me just read this. On the famous woman caught in adultery scene. So as noted in the bracketed NRSV text, this passage is missing in most of the oldest manuscripts. It also interrupts the flow of this gospel's thought and uses language missing in the rest of the gospel, such as scribes or teachers of the law, a phrase common in the synoptics but absent in John. Because the story fits the character of Jesus, however, many consider it an authentic story about him that is simply out of place where it stands. Yeah, I agree. It just feels out of place here. So we're going to skip over that and move right to the light of the world.
Okay.
And most sure you all are familiar. I think it probably just happened at a different time. And it kind of,
Sure.
I still want you to be in the mindset of, okay, we just had this water libation ceremony, and there's another little ceremony that they do that we'll talk about here.
Okay, I'll read a few verses. Verse 12.
Verse 12.
Okay. Once again, Yeshua spoke to the people and said, I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will never walk in the darkness, but will have the light of life. So the Pharisees said to him, You are testifying about yourself. Your testimony is not valid. And Yeshua replied, Even if I testify about myself, my testimony is valid, because I know where I came from and where I am going. But you do not know where I came from or where I am going. You judge according to the flesh. I judge no one. But even if I do judge, my judgment is true, because I am not alone. I am with the Father who sent me. Even in your own law, it is written that the testimony of 2 men is valid. I am one who testifies about myself, and the Father who sent me also testifies about me.
Does that make him the 2 witnesses?
Suppose it does.
I think somebody wrote about that in a book.
Interesting. It's not me.
Oh.
And he mentions in the law it's written the testimony of 2 men is valid. I am one and the Father is one. So the testimony of Yeshua and the words of God, the commandments of God. Also 2 witnesses.
I was just thinking about when you said the 2 witnesses were his kingship and high priesthood.
Yeah.
But that's more like a revelation thing.
But yeah, it applies here.
Sounds, yeah. Connecting some dots.
I'm going to keep going?
Yeah, finish this up here.
All right. Where is your Father? They asked him. You do not know me or my Father, Yeshua answered. If you knew me, you would know my Father as well. He spoke these words while teaching in the temple courts near the treasury. Yet no one seized him, because his hour had not yet come. Again he said to them, I am going away, and you will look for me. But you will die in your sin. Where I am going, you cannot come. So the Jews began to ask, Will he kill himself, since he says, Where I am going, you cannot come? Then he told them, You are from below, I am from above. You are of this world, I am not of this world. That is why I told you that you would die in your sins. For unless you believe that I am he, you will die in your sins. Who are you? They asked. Just what I've been telling you from the beginning, Yeshua replied. I have much to say about you and much to judge, but the one who sent me is truthful, and what I have heard from him I tell the world. They did not understand that he was telling them about the Father. So Yeshua said, When you have lifted up the Son of Man, then you will know that I am he, and that I do nothing on my own, but speak exactly what the Father has taught me. He who sent me is with me. He has not left me alone, because I always do what pleases him.
All right. So yeah, let's go back to the light of the world here. I see there's a note on it, but I'm not sure exactly what it says, but I'm just going to read it anyways.
Yeah.
Because I do have some thoughts, and you probably have some thoughts. So Jerusalem was lit up at night, most predominantly during the Festival of Tabernacles and dedication. The lighting ceremony and dancing were key elements in celebrating tabernacles. Jewish teachers applied the metaphor of light, including the light of the world, to many positive people and things. A more specific allusion here could be to the light of the light to the nations. In Isaiah 42:6 and Isaiah 49:6 refers to the mission of God's servant. So, and I've also heard of the tradition where they'd have 3 great, like, giant golden candlesticks in, like, the temple courtyard, and they would take, like, the old priests' clothes and, like, use them as wicks, and you'd have, like, the younger priest would have to climb up there, and they would light these candles, and you could, like, see these from, like, miles away, and that's where we get this idea of, like, a city on a hill, which, Jerusalem was a city on a hill. So again, Jesus is speaking in context, like, okay, he's still at Sukkot, he's talking about this, probably the last night, and this, everyone's dancing. It was very common. They have these big, giant candles going. It's great referencing, hey, I'm the light of the world, just like you said, I'm the water of life. Just visual images speaking on, the things around him, so getting that context helps.
That's right. Yeah. Isaiah 2. In the last days, the mountain of the house of Yahweh will be established as the chief of the mountains. It will be raised above the hills. All nations will stream to it. I skip down to verse 5. Come, O house of Jacob, let us walk in the light of Yahweh. So I think all the nations streaming to Jerusalem, and the idea is the word and the light of Yahweh will go forth to all the peoples. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's just like all these passages, like Zechariah 14, like Sukkot. It's like, why does Sukkot keep showing up? It's because it's a picture of, when he'll come to tabernacle with us in the millennial reign. It's a picture of the 8th day, if you will. And that's why there's an 8th day in Sukkot. It's showing you that, okay, this is the final, 8 being like the infinity number. We have these 7 days and these 7,000 years, and we're looking forward to that eternity. And Sukkot is just a picture of, like, we're pretty much doing for 8 days what we were doing for eternity with Sukkot, and that's why it's one of my favorite feasts.
Oh yeah, it's got to be my favorite. And just to knock it out, that Zechariah 14:16 says, and this is after the final battle of good and evil. It says, and all the survivors from the nations that came against Jerusalem will go up year after year to worship the King, Yahweh of hosts, and to celebrate the Feast of Tabernacles, aka Sukkot.
I always try to bring that one up when people are like, they're like, oh, we don't do the feast, they're for the Jews. I'm like, well, you're going to be doing them millennial reigns.
Yeah.
Might want to be a little familiar. But oh well. At that point too, it's like, yeah, of course, there's so much division.
Oh, right.
With all the calendars, and it's like no one can keep it perfect, and Jesus is going to come and clear it all up for us. But
right.
I think doing what we're doing tonight, it's important and encouraging to look forward to these things. That's why I wanted to have you on again.
I love it.
And I didn't even look forward here to see how much more. I don't think it really says again if he's still at Sukkot. We're just kind of even guessing at this point with the light of the world that he's still there. It makes sense.
Right. Yeah, I think the rest of the passage is just them continuing to question him and his legitimacy.
Right, yeah, so we can end it
wrap
there.
it up here.
Yeah, let's see if we got any other notes. Yeah,
it's very cool. Just, my final thoughts are just when you study history, you study the tradition, you see all these things pop out of the Gospels that I would not have and did not see growing up just reading it, just reading it through. So they say, if you're a new believer and you want to start somewhere in the Bible, they say just start with the book of John, right? And I'm like, sure, read it once and make sure that you're reading through the whole Old Testament and study upon your history. I mean,
that's why I picked John, because it seems it's the most Jewish. He kind of lets you know, and it was the Feast of Booths. It's like so.
Yeah. But just you can read it through once and then learn a little bit more history, a little bit more of the cultural background, read it through again, and just get way more insight, and then read it through again as you continue to learn more and more, and just the scriptures open up, and you learn about Alexander Eunaeus and the Pharisees, you learn about Hillel and Shammai, and you learn about the water libation ceremony, and Shmini Atzeret, Shimkat Torah, and all the history that goes with all these celebrations and the context of the words that he's using. It really comes to life here.
Think about all the way back to chapter 7 there when they said, now the Jewish festival of booths. How do you feel about that phrase?
Yeah, where was that? Chapter 7.
7 verse 2.
The Jewish Feast of Tabernacles. Who's here?
Like what do you say to people who say, like, why do you keep those feasts? They're for the Jews.
Oh, right. Well, when a person says that, usually it comes from a place of thinking that God has festivals and holy days for Jews and then separate ones for Christians. There's another line of thinking that some people say that when it says the Jewish Feast of Tabernacles, they're saying that there was two separate calendars, which is you hinted at earlier, and that there was the Judean calendar, and then there was a separate calendar that the true followers of God kept. I think it's as simple as this. John is writing to an audience that may not be as familiar with these things. He's writing to an audience that many of which may be Gentiles. And so it makes sense that it's just written as the Jewish feast, because people in that time and place, people from everywhere, in Jerusalem and the surrounding areas. And so if you just say Feast of Tabernacles, they may not understand. But if you say Jewish feast.
Yeah. I just wish you said now it was Yahweh's appointed time. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. But I kind of think like who spoke that way at the time,
True.
Who.
Yeah, this is probably way off topic, but I was just thinking about you today and your frogs on anti-Semitism. Yes. I had a patient today, and I just kept my mouth shut. They were just going off about just a lot of like the Candace Owens stuff, and like a lot of this anti-Semitism coming around. How Israel's bad and Israel's in control of America. And I just think back to like everything we just talked about with the Sanhedrin, how there's corrupt Jews, right? There's Jews in name only, but like Jewish people as a whole are not evil. Like a lot of the Pharisees as a whole were not evil, and it just bothered me. I didn't want to bring it up because I know it's a whole rabbit trail, but
I'll have to do a whole different video on that, but. Yeah, I mean, it's little verses like this that some will rip out of the context and try to make it say something that it's not. I mean, John could be writing and talking about a watch of the night. Now, is he talking about a Roman watch or an Hebraic watch of the night? Well, I don't know. You'll have to figure out the context. Because I forget which Gospels it is, but there are some where they talk about 4 watches in the night and some where they talk about 3 watches during the night. And it's just the difference between a Roman understanding or a Jewish understanding. So it's very, very plausible that they're simply writing to a multicultural audience. So what is understood by one person may not be understood by another. So it makes sense. He would just say, "Oh, it's the Jewish Feast of Tabernacles."
And when do you think this gospel was written? Probably way later than the Synoptics, right?
That's a good question. I haven't,
because I know Revelation was written so late.
Right. Yeah.
I'm almost thinking like Josephus, where he's trying to explain Jewish things to Romans. You're getting that bit of that vibe here. So maybe you're onto something there. It's like, guys, his audience is a little different than Matthew, Mark, and Luke.
We should find out when that was. I'm just looking at. There's a few places in Acts where it talks about Jewish synagogues, like Acts 13:5. When they arrived at Salamis, they proclaimed the word of God in the Jewish synagogues. Of course, synagogue just means assembly. John 6:4, the Jewish Passover festival was near. I'm not seeing that same designation in any of the synoptics when I type in a word search for Jewish. Mm-hmm. So it seems like it's really just John and Acts that use that convention of saying Jewish. And we'll just do a quick, when was the gospel John written? Okay, people put it late.
Makes sense.
Around 80 to 90. So, and some people say it was composed in Ephesus. So if it was composed in Ephesus, we're talking about Asia Minor, very Greek, and very late after the destruction of the temple. So you'll be a very multicultural Greek audience who may not have been as familiar with the terminology. Let's look up, when was the Gospel of Matthew written? Earlier, between 70 and 90. Some say it could have been as early as 50 to 60.
I was going to say, didn't Matthew die before 70?
Yeah. Yes, it looks like the synoptics are all written earlier. Yep. And then when was Acts written?
You assume they would have written it down pretty early, right?
Yeah.
Before they would forget, but what probably wasn't fully written down and complete.
So Acts is dated to 115.
Oh, interesting.
And proposed dates range from 60 to 150. So it could, yeah.
Well, that makes sense.
But
all those stories would take a long time to collect.
Oh yeah. And compile. So
it's like Paul's letters, tracking those down.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's not like they were written the day that it happened, and spread around. They wrote these things down and then compiled them and sent them out as letters later.
So Acts and John both very late.
Yeah. Both very late.
So probably a much more Greek audience, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm. Probably a post-temple audience.
That's a very important point.
And if it was a post-temple audience, it's not like the Jews are front and center to everything that you do in your life. If this is Asia Minor, you see Jews living in your town. You hear about what happened in Jerusalem, but you're not in Judea Central, right? So somebody has to tell you, this is a Jewish feast called Passover. This is a Jewish feast called Tabernacles. And it probably doesn't make sense to say, this is a feast of Yahweh. Who's Yahweh? Oh, he's the Jews' God. Oh, well, it makes more sense to just, this is the Jewish feast. You know what I mean?
Sounds like I don't have enough room on my scroll for that.
Right. Oh, man. There's Occam's razor. The simplest answer is probably the right one.
I think I read that maybe in the study Bible, they would kind of look at the end of their scroll and be like, okay, I gotta either use this space or summarize what I was going to say because I'm running out of room. And you don't really think about it that way. It's not like a Word doc where I can just keep going on my Greater Apocalypse novel for another 1,000.
Exactly.
All right, Daniel, thanks for coming on. Did a whole hour there. I want to hear from the kids. It's fun.
enjoyed it. You have a wonderful Sukkot, Dr. Klein.
Too. I'll have to have you on for more heresy soon.
All right.
Have a blessed Sukkot.
You too.
Good night.
Bye-bye.
Take care.
We pray Yeshua will lead us home. You're the light of the world and the water of life. Whoever drinks from your well will be satisfied. I know this road is long, friend, but the Father is to lead. We'll never reach a dead end. I know this road is long, friend. To that city on a hill, Jerusalem. I know this road is long, friend. That city on a hill, Jerusalem. I know this road is long, friend. The golden lamps raised high, the glorious Son of Man. Worship with shouts of joy, shouts of praise. The tabernacled here to show us grace. We wave day palms, we lift our hands to embrace the light of your endless rays. On this feast of Sukkot, we pray Jesus will lead us home. You're the light of the world and the water of life. Whoever drinks from your well will be satisfied. A rush of wind, a touch of light. Your sword cuts clouds on the darkest nights. Your kingdom waits your endless reign. An easterly sweep my laments colonnade. By the golden gate the stone bursts free. The dead are raised, the first fruits of fall. No donkey now, but a horse and crown. From the Mount of Olives you come down. Trembling hands we wave, willow myrtle, citron, and date palms. With trembling hearts we wait for your glory to reign till our hearts flood. With trembling hands we wave, willow myrtle, citron, and date palms.